honestly, Nicole, when are you going to get a real job? This community outreach thing is cute, but it doesn't exactly scream ambition, does it? Caden, my ever-charming older brother, drawled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. He didn't even look at me, his gaze fixed on some imaginary point of success only he could see. My name is Nicole, and for most of my 29 years, I've been the background noise in the grand opera of Cox & Son development. That's Dad, Ralph, and Caden. They build things, big, shiny, expensive things, and I, apparently, collect stray cats and good intentions. At least that's how they see it. We were in Dad's study, a room that always smelled of old leather and new money. He sat behind his ridiculously oversized mahogany desk, a monument to his own importance. "Your brother has a point, sweetie," Dad rumbled, his voice the one that could make grown men tremble and investors open their wallets. "This passion for helping people, it's admirable in its own little way, but it's not the real world." "My little way helped get the funding for the after-school arts program downtown," I said, keeping my voice even. "The one the city council praised last month." Caden snorted. "Pocket change, Nick. We're talking about legacy here, about building an empire." He gestured vaguely around the opulent room. "This doesn't happen by baking cookies for fundraisers. It was always like this. My efforts, my passions, were trivialized, reduced to quaint hobbies. The hours I poured into grant proposals, the networking, the genuine impact these little charities had on real lives, all dismissed with a condescending pat on the head." "Speaking of which," Dad said, leaning forward, his eyes suddenly sharp, "we need to talk about Blackwood Creek. Ah, there it was. The land Mom left me. 10 acres of quiet woodland and a meandering stream, her sanctuary. To them, it was just an untidy blot on a map, an asset not being properly exploited." "What about it?" I asked, my guard instantly up. "It's a drain, Nicole," Caden said, jumping in. "Property taxes are a killer. It's undeveloped, frankly. It's worthless to someone like you. You don't have the capital or the know-how to do anything with it." "It's a burden, sweetie," Dad echoed, his voice softening into that faux concerned tone he used when he was about to screw someone over. "We've been thinking, Caden and I, we could take it off your hands. For your own good, of course." I watched them, the dynamic duo. Dad, the patriarch, exuding an aura of absolute authority, and Caden, his smug apprentice, already practicing his own brand of dismissive arrogance. The air in the room felt thick with their unspoken intentions. "It's men's business, sweetie," Dad said, delivering his classic line with a dismissive wave of his hand. "You stick to your charity work, it suits you better. We'll give you, say, 50,000 for it. Clean break. You can put it towards one of your projects." 50,000 for 10 acres of land that, while undeveloped, bordered an area slowly gaining interest from developers. I saw the predatory gleam in their eyes, the barely concealed impatience. They thought I was an idiot, a naive little girl playing at being a grown-up. I held their gaze, letting a small, enigmatic smile touch my lips. It wasn't the smile of agreement, but they wouldn't know that. 50,000? That's generous of you to offer. I paused, letting them lean in. "I'll consider your offer," I told them. Relief washed over their faces, so blatant it was almost comical. "Good girl," Dad said, leaning back. "Sensible decision." Later that evening, as I passed Caden's home office, his door slightly ajar, I heard his voice, low and gloating. "Yeah, Thompson, it's a done deal. Blackwood Creek is ours. Prime condo development. Easy money. Oh, Nicole. Nah, she practically bit our hands off. 50 grand. Fleeced the charity case, didn't we? She'll probably donate it all to some stray dog shelter by tea time." His laughter, sharp and cruel, echoed down the hall. I stopped, hidden in the shadows. The casual, brutal dismissal, the sheer, unadulterated greed. It wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about every condescending remark, every patronizing smile, every time they'd made me feel small and insignificant. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach, and in its center, a tiny spark of righteous fury ignited. Oh, they had no idea. They had absolutely no idea what this charity case was capable of. My smile, this time, was entirely genuine and utterly invisible to them. The next morning, the bitter taste of Caden's words still clung to me. I met Wendy at our usual coffee spot, the aroma of roasted beans a small comfort. "You will not believe what those two vultures are up to now," I said, stirring my latte with more force than necessary. Wendy raised an eyebrow, her expression already one of weary resignation. "Let me guess. Something involving your adorable little hobbies and their vastly important business empire?" "Worse," I said. "They want Blackwood Creek." "Your mum's land?" Wendy's eyes widened. "But you love that place." "They're offering 50,000. Said it's men's business and I should stick to my charities." I recounted Caden's phone call, his gleeful pronouncement of having fleeced the charity case. Wendy's jaw tightened. "Oh, that arrogant, misogynistic... Nicole, you can't let them. That land is rightfully yours. It's probably worth 10 times what they're offering, knowing them." "That's what I was thinking," I admitted. Last night, after I heard Caden, I couldn't sleep. I spent hours online, looking at property assessments, zoning maps, recent sales in the surrounding areas. "And?" Wendy leaned forward. "And," I said, a grim satisfaction creeping into my voice, "you're right. It's got significant undeveloped potential, especially if someone, say, wanted to build luxury condos." A deep pang went through me, then, sharp and sudden. Mum. She used to take me to Blackwood Creek for picnics. We'd skip stones in the stream, and she'd tell me stories about the trees, how they whispered secrets if you listened closely enough. The thought of Dad and Caden's bulldozers tearing through that quiet piece of earth, her sanctuary, made my stomach churn. "You have to fight them, Nick," Wendy said fiercely. "Don't let them bully you out of it." "Oh, I'm not going to let them bully me," I said, a new kind of resolve hardening within me. "But fighting them head on? That's what they expect. That's a game they always win." A different idea, still nebulous but undeniably potent, was beginning to form. Wendy had recommended a lawyer, Matthew, a few months back, when I was navigating some tricky grant paperwork for one of the shelters. "He's sharp, no nonsense, and doesn't suffer fools gladly," she'd said. Perfect. I called Matthew's office, feigning a need for advice on a straightforward property sale. "My family has made an offer on a piece of land I inherited," I explained when we met in his uncluttered modern office. "I just want to ensure everything is above board." He listened patiently, his gaze keen. 50,000, you said, for 10 acres at Blackwood Creek?" He made a non-committal sound. "And you're considering this offer?" "They're quite persuasive," I said, allowing a hint of my family's pressure to colour my tone. "They believe it's in my best interest." I then casually shifted. "You know, I've also been exploring options for some of my charitable interests. It's surprising how complex land donations to non-profits can be. All the tax implications, the legal structures." Matthew's eyes didn't leave mine. "Indeed, it requires careful planning to ensure the donor's intentions are met and the receiving organisation is protected." He paused. "Is that something you're actively considering, Ms. Cox? A donation?" "Just exploring all avenues, Mr. Graham," I said smoothly. "One likes to be informed." The pressure from Dad and Caden ramped up almost immediately. "Have you thought any more about our generous offer, sweetie?" Dad asked at dinner a few nights later, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "It's a good deal, Nicole," Caden chimed in, already sounding like he was spending the profits. "Cash in hand. No headaches for you." Their fake concern for my financial well-being was so transparent it was almost insulting. "I'm still thinking," I said, buying time. "Don't think too long," Caden warned. "Offers like this don't stay on the table forever." Finally, the day came. I walked into Dad's office, the contract already laid out on his desk like a sacrificial offering. Caden was there too, practically vibrating with anticipation. "Decided to be sensible then?" Dad asked, though it wasn't really a question. I took a deep breath. "Yes, I'll accept your offer." The relief in the room was palpable. Caden grinned, a shark who'd just scented blood. Dad pushed the papers and a pen towards me. With a hand that I willed to be steady, I signed my name, the ink feeling like a betrayal of Mum's memory. Dad slid a check across the desk. $50,000. It felt like blood money. "Good girl," Dad said again, that infuriatingly patronizing tone back in full force. "You won't regret this." "I'm sure I won't," I said, my voice surprisingly even. The moment I walked out of their office, the check clutched in my hand. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd recently committed to memory. "Zuriel," I said, my heart beginning to pound with a different kind of anticipation. "It's Nicole. I believe I found the perfect flagship location for Haven for Hope, and I think we can get it for a steal." Zuriel's office was a world away from Dad's mahogany fortress. It was smaller, brighter, filled with plants and colourful artwork made by children. The air hummed with quiet purpose, not self-importance. Zuriel herself, the director of the Haven for Hope Foundation, was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and an air of calm, formidable competence. "A steal, you say?" Zuriel smiled, gesturing for me to sit. "Nicole, that's wonderful news. Tell me everything." I laid it all out. The paltry offer from Dad and Caden, their blatant deception, and my burgeoning plan to use their $50,000 to donate the land right back to a cause that would truly benefit the community. So, they essentially paid for their own undevelopment? Zuriel's smile widened. "That's rather poetic." "I thought so," I said. "The land, Blackwood Creek, it's perfect. Secluded, peaceful, but still accessible." Over the next few weeks, Zuriel and I became a whirlwind of clandestine activity. We met with architects who, inspired by the mission and the unique opportunity, offered pro bono preliminary sketches. The designs for the Women's Shelter and Resource Centre were breathtaking. Not an institution, but a sanctuary. Warm, inviting buildings nestled amongst the trees, a community garden, play areas for children. Our city desperately needed a facility like this. The existing shelters were overwhelmed, turning women away daily. Matthew, my lawyer, became the legal architect of the plan. He was meticulous, his attention to detail unwavering. "The donation agreement needs to be ironclad, Nicole," he'd said during one of our late-night sessions in his office, surrounded by stacks of legal documents. "Once this is filed, there's no going back, and knowing your father's reputation, we need to anticipate every possible challenge." "That's why I came to you, Matthew," I'd replied. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a strategist, and I sensed a quiet satisfaction in him as he helped weave this intricate web. My little charity network, the one Dad and Caden so readily dismissed, proved to be an invaluable asset. A contact at the city planning department, a woman I'd worked with on securing permits for a soup kitchen, discreetly provided insights into zoning benefits for community projects, fast-tracking certain preliminary approvals. Local artisans, whom I'd connected with for fundraising auctions in the past, eagerly offered to contribute their skills and materials once the shelter was announced. Community leaders, tired of Cox & Sons' often ruthless development tactics, pledged their quiet support. It was a delicate dance of secrecy. Dad's influence in the city was far-reaching, his network of informants and allies extensive. Every meeting, every phone call was carefully managed. I used burner phones, met in out-of-the-way cafes, and became adept at misdirection. The contrast was stark. While Dad and Caden were wining and dining investors, boasting about their soulless luxury condo project, I was meeting with women who had escaped abusive situations, listening to their stories and channeling their hopes into the design of Haven for Hope. Their courage, their resilience, fueled my every move. This wasn't just about getting back at my family anymore. It was about building something meaningful, something that would offer a lifeline to those who needed it most. One evening, Caden nearly gave me a heart attack. I was at home, reviewing the latest shelter blueprints on my laptop, completely absorbed. He walked into the living room unannounced. "What you working on so intently, Nick? Another Save the Squirrels petition?" My heart leapt into my throat. I slammed the laptop lid down, maybe a little too quickly. "Just some research for the children's literacy program," I stammered, my mind racing. "Looking into new software." He gave me a suspicious look, his eyes lingering on the closed laptop. "Right. Literacy? Very... you." He shrugged, seemingly satisfied, and sauntered off towards the kitchen, probably in search of a beer. I let out a breath I hadn't realised I was holding, my hands trembling. That was too close. The days ticked by, each one bringing us closer to the point of no return. Zuriel was a rock, her calm demeanour a constant reassurance. "You're doing incredible work, Nicole," she told me, after one particularly grueling meeting with a potential major donor for the shelter's operating fund, a donor I'd secured through a connection from my frivolous art gala organising. "You have a real gift for this." Her words were a balm to years of being underestimated. I was discovering a wellspring of strategic thinking, of leadership, that I never knew I possessed. Then, Matthew called. His voice was serious, devoid of its usual dry wit. "Nicole, the final donation documents are drafted and ready for your signature. We file tomorrow morning, timed precisely with the county clerk's office opening. Once it's recorded, the transfer of Blackwood Creek to the Haven for Hope Foundation will be absolute and irrevocable." He paused. "But once it's done, the blowback from your family will be immense. Are you prepared for that?" I looked out my window at the city lights, a landscape Dad and Caden were so determined to conquer, to shape in their own image. A different kind of landscape was taking shape in my mind, one of hope, of sanctuary. I took a deep breath, a sense of steely resolve settling over me. "That's precisely the point, Matthew." The weeks after the donation was filed crawled by with agonising slowness. Dad and Caden, blissfully unaware, were at their insufferable peak. The local business journal ran a glossy feature on Cox & Sons' upcoming landmark development at Blackwood Creek, complete with artists' renderings of sleek, soulless condo towers obliterating any trace of Mum's beloved woodland. They paraded the article around like a trophy. At family dinners, obligatory, tense affairs I endured with gritted teeth, they barely acknowledged my presence, except to occasionally throw a condescending remark my way about my latest charitable endeavour. "Still playing Florence Nightingale, Nicole?" Caden would sneer, while Dad would chuckle indulgently. Each barb, each dismissive glance, only cemented my resolve. Their hubris was a spectacle, a towering edifice of arrogance, just waiting for the foundations to be kicked out from under it. The thought of their faces, when they finally learned the truth, was a constant, motivating hum beneath the surface of my carefully maintained composure. My Aunt Vivian, Dad's younger sister, was a quiet, observant woman who had always maintained a polite but distinct distance from her brother's cutthroat business world. We met for a rare lunch, a small Italian place she favoured. I didn't reveal my plan, of course, but I subtly gauged her feelings about Dad and Caden's latest venture. "Ralph is ambitious," Vivian said, carefully choosing her words as she sipped her iced tea. "And Caden takes after him. Sometimes I think they forget there's more to life than the bottom line." There was a veiled disapproval in her tone, a weariness that resonated with my own. She didn't press me for details about my life, but her gaze was knowing, almost sympathetic. It was a small comfort, a silent acknowledgement that not everyone in the family was blinded by greed. Meanwhile, the PR consultant Zuriel and I had engaged, a sharp woman named Sarah, began to subtly lay the groundwork. She anonymously leaked a carefully worded concern to a popular local blogger known for his environmental activism. The post was vague, mentioning potential environmental restrictions and unforeseen ecological sensitivities at the Blackwood Creek site that might complicate large-scale development. Dad and Caden, when they caught wind of it, dismissed it instantly. "Desmond Murray again?" Dad scoffed at the dinner table, referring to his longtime business rival. "Trying to stir up trouble, throw a wrench in the works. Pathetic." "He's just jealous of the Blackwood project," Caden added, puffing out his chest. "Our permits are airtight. This is nothing." But I saw a flicker of annoyance in Dad's eyes, a tightening around his mouth. The seed of doubt, however small, had been planted. A few days later, the first real tremor hit their fortress. A formal-looking, official-esque letter arrived at Cox & Sons' legal department. It was unsigned, printed on generic letterhead, but it hinted ominously at a prioritised community land use designation being considered for the Blackwood Creek parcel, citing vague municipal codes and environmental protection statutes. Caden, predictably, was furious. He stormed into Dad's office, waving the letter. I happened to be dropping off some unrelated family paperwork, a convenient excuse to be in the vicinity, and overheard his outburst from the hallway. "Look at this garbage, Dad! Some crackpot environmental group trying to intimidate us. Prioritize community land use. What a load of crap." Dad took the letter, his brow furrowed. He read it, then tossed it contemptuously onto his desk. "Amateurs. Our permits are solid. We've greased all the necessary wheels. This is just noise, Caden. Get our lawyers to draft a cease and desist, something to scare them off. Squash this annoyance before the groundbreaking. Don't waste any more time on it." They didn't investigate further. They didn't call the city planning department to verify. Their arrogance, their absolute certainty in their own power and influence, blinded them to the possibility that this could be anything more than a minor nuisance. They couldn't conceive of a threat they hadn't anticipated, couldn't imagine a scenario where they weren't in complete control. My nerves, however, were fraying. The waiting, the secrecy, the constant fear of discovery. It was taking its toll. Every ring of the phone made me jump. Every unexpected knock on the door sent a jolt of anxiety through me. One evening, Caden cornered me in the kitchen. He'd been drinking, his eyes narrowed and suspicious. "You wouldn't know anything about these rumours about Blackwood Creek, would you, Nicole?" he asked, his voice low and menacing. "Been talking to any of your tree-hugging friends? Filling their heads with nonsense?" My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. He knew. I widened my eyes, summoning every ounce of composure I possessed, feigning innocent hurt. "Why would I do that, Caden?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. "You said it was men's business. I wouldn't dream of interfering." He stared at me for a long moment, his gaze searching. Then he grunted. "Yeah, well, keep it that way." He turned and walked away, leaving me leaning against the counter, my legs weak with relief. He didn't believe me, not entirely, but he didn't have proof. And his own ingrained belief in my harmlessness, my supposed inability to comprehend or influence their world, was, for now, my greatest shield. The days leading up to Dad and Caden's groundbreaking felt like the quiet, heavy air before a thunderstorm. The final pieces of my own, very different event clicked into place with a satisfying precision. Zuriel, Matthew, and I met one last time in Matthew's office to review the press kit. It was comprehensive. The official announcement of the Haven for Hope Foundation's acquisition of Blackwood Creek, the shelter's mission statement, compelling statistics on the desperate need for such a facility in our city, and glowing testimonials from community leaders who were already in on the secret. "The invitations have all gone out," Zuriel confirmed, tapping a pristine white envelope. "Mayor Thompson has RSVP'd yes. So have Councilwoman Davies and Police Chief Miller. And Juliet Marshall, the investigative journalist from Channel 4 News, personally confirmed her attendance." Juliet. She was known for her hard-hitting local stories, for not backing down from powerful figures. Her presence would amplify the impact tenfold. The invitations were for a special community announcement at Blackwood Creek, timed for exactly 1 hour after. Dad and Caden's supposed groundbreaking ceremony was scheduled to begin. The timing was crucial, designed for maximum disruption and public exposure of their defeat. A wave of cold fear, sharp and sudden, washed over me. This wasn't just a business maneuver or a clever legal play anymore. This was going to irrevocably break my family. The thought, even now, sent a shiver down my spine. There would be no coming back from this. The lines would be drawn, the bridges burned. "Are you all right, Nicole?" Zuriel asked gently, noticing the shift in my expression. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about the impact." "It will be significant," Matthew said, his tone neutral but his eyes understanding. "For everyone involved." That afternoon, I drove out to Blackwood Creek one last time before it became a battleground. The wind whispered through the tall pines, the same sound Mum used to say was the trees sharing secrets. Sunlight dappled the forest floor, and the stream gurgled peacefully. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I could almost see it. The warm, welcoming buildings of Haven for Hope, nestled among the trees, children's laughter echoing where now there was only the rustle of leaves. A beacon of hope, a place of safety and new beginnings. This was about so much more than revenge now. It was about creating something lasting, something good, from the ashes of their greed. Back in my apartment, I pulled out the short speech I'd prepared. I'd agonized over every word, wanting it to be poised, powerful, and undeniably truthful. I practiced it in front of the mirror, focusing on keeping my voice steady, my emotions in check. The words had to land with precision, each one a carefully aimed dart. The evening before D-Day, my carefully constructed composure nearly shattered. I was making tea, trying to calm my racing thoughts, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. My stomach lurched. I answered, my voice a little breathless. Hello? A low, menacing voice, digitally distorted but unmistakably hostile, crackled through the speaker. Some people don't appreciate surprises, Ms. Cox, especially when they involve valuable property. It would be a shame if your community project ran into unforeseen difficulties. My blood ran cold. The line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. Who was it? Was it Dad or Caden, somehow getting wind of the specifics? Had one of their less savoury associates decided to issue a warning? Or was it someone else entirely? Someone they'd screwed over in the past, who now saw an opportunity to cause trouble? The ambiguity was terrifying. I immediately called Matthew. I just got a threatening call, I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts to control it. I repeated the message verbatim. There was a pause on his end. It could be a bluff, Nicole, he said, his voice calm and reassuring, though I could hear an underlying tension. An attempt to rattle you. Don't let it. We've taken every precaution. The donation is legally unassailable. The security for tomorrow's announcement is in place. But what if we proceed as planned? Matthew interrupted, his tone firm. This changes nothing. If anything, it confirms we're on the right track. They're scared. He was right. Or at least, I desperately wanted him to be. But the threat lingered, a dark shadow cast over the impending dawn. The stakes had just been raised, and the taste of fear was suddenly very real. This wasn't just about public humiliation anymore. There was an undercurrent of something uglier, something potentially dangerous. But I'd come too far to back down now. The shelter, the women it would serve, depended on it, and a small, stubborn part of me refused to be intimidated. They wanted to play dirty? Let them try. The morning of the groundbreaking dawned bright and clear, a painfully beautiful day for a public execution. My phone remained silent, no further threats, but the memory of that distorted voice still sent shivers down my spine. I'd sent my regrets to Dad's assistant earlier in the week, a vague email about a prior commitment at one of my charities that I couldn't possibly reschedule. I imagined Dad and Caden exchanging smug, knowing glances. Poor Nicole, always busy with her little projects. In reality, I was holed up in a discreet cafe a few blocks from Blackwood Creek. Zuriel sat opposite me, radiating a calm I desperately tried to absorb. Matthew was on his phone, speaking in low, clipped tones to our on-site team. Sarah, our PR lead, nervously tapped her pen against a notepad. The knot of anxiety in my stomach had tightened into a vice. Our photographer and a couple of volunteers are in place, Matthew reported, hanging up. Blending in with the catering staff Dad and Caden hired, they'll signal us the moment the first bulldozer moves. And the city officials? Zuriel asked. En route. They'll arrive precisely as scheduled, Matthew confirmed. Police escort for traffic management, all very official. I sipped my lukewarm coffee, my hand trembling slightly. From our vantage point, we couldn't see Blackwood Creek directly, but I could picture the scene. Dad and Caden preening in their expensive suits, schmoozing with their equally smug investors. Champagne flutes clinking, self-congratulatory speeches being rehearsed. Their utter obliviousness was almost painful to witness, like watching someone walk confidently towards an open manhole. Try to eat something, Nicole, Zuriel said gently, pushing a croissant towards me. I shook my head, my appetite non-existent. The minutes ticked by, each one stretching into an eternity. Sarah's phone buzzed. She listened intently, then gave us a thumbs up. The first bulldozer is starting its engine. They're lining up at the access road. This was it. The countdown had begun. My own phone vibrated. It was Wendy. Thinking of you. Break a leg. Or, don't actually break their legs, just their egos. A small smile touched my lips. Thanks, Wen. I'll try to stick to the egos. Another update from Sarah. Bulldozer is moving. It's on the access road, heading towards the clearing. I closed my eyes for a moment, picturing Mum's face, her love for that land. This is for you, Mum, I thought, and for all the women who need a safe place to land. The cafe was quiet, the lunchtime rush yet to begin. The clatter of cutlery from the kitchen, the distant hum of traffic, ordinary sounds that felt surreal against the backdrop of the drama unfolding just streets away. Matthew's phone rang again. This time it was a different tone, a more urgent staccato ring. He answered, his expression immediately tensing. Yes? What's happening? He listened, his eyes widening slightly. A slow smile spread across his face. He looked at me, then at Zuriel, and mouthed, "Showtime!" He hung up. The city officials have arrived. They're at the entrance to Blackwood Creek. The foreman is trying to stop them, but they're not having any of it. We could only imagine the scene at the creek. Dad and Caden, probably in mid-boast to their investors, blissfully unaware that their grand plans were about to be spectacularly derailed. Then, Sarah's phone, which she'd placed on the table, crackled to life. It was a live feed from our on-site photographer, patched through. We all leaned in, straining to hear. The voice was tinny, frantic. Mr. Cox, sir, we've got a problem, a big problem." It was the site foreman, his voice laced with panic. There are people here, city officials, lots of them. They're handing out stop work orders. They say it's not ours to develop." There was a muffled sound of consternation. Then Caden's voice, sharp and arrogant. "What the hell are you talking about, Bill? Not ours. Don't be ridiculous. Get them off my property." Another voice, calmer, more authoritative, presumably a city official. "Sir, I have a legally binding document here stating that this property, known as Blackwood Creek, was officially deeded to the Haven for Hope Foundation 3 weeks ago. All development permits previously issued for Cox & Son development on this parcel are hereby revoked." A stunned silence followed, so profound we could almost hear it through the phone. Then, a choked sound, like someone had been punched in the gut. Caden's smug expression, the one I'd seen 1,000 times, the one that always made me feel small and insignificant. I could picture it now, freezing, cracking, then shattering into a million pieces of disbelief and dawning horror. Matthew grinned. "Phase 1 complete." Zuriel squeezed my hand. "You did it, Nicole." But it wasn't over yet. The real show was about to begin. "Let's go," I said, standing up, a strange calm settling over me. The anxiety had burned away, replaced by a cold, clear focus. "It's time for our announcement." As we arrived at the perimeter of Blackwood Creek, the scene was one of controlled chaos. The gleaming yellow bulldozer sat idle, its massive shovel resting on the earth like a defeated beast. Stern-faced city officials, identifiable by their clipboards and official-looking jackets, stood firm, blocking the access road. A small, determined group of Haven for Hope supporters, organised by Zuriel, held polite, hand-painted signs. "Welcome Haven for Hope," and "A sanctuary for our community." Dad and Caden were centre stage, their faces flushed a furious, mottled red. Dad was shouting, jabbing his finger at a bewildered-looking city manager. "This is an outrage. We have permits. We have investors. You can't just waltz in here and—" "Mr. Cox," the city manager said, his voice amplified slightly by a small megaphone. "As we've explained, the land known as Blackwood Creek is no longer your property to develop. It was legally and irrevocably deeded to the Haven for Hope Foundation on October 12th. He held up a document. "This is a matter of public record." Caden, sputtering, turned on one of the Haven for Hope volunteers. "Who the hell are you people? What is this nonsense?" Just then, the first news van, Channel 4, with Juliet Marshall in the passenger seat, pulled up, followed closely by 2 others. They weren't here for Cox & Sons' triumphant groundbreaking. They were here for the pre-scheduled dedication of the future women's shelter, an event Sarah had meticulously orchestrated. Dad and Caden froze, their arrogant bluster deflating like punctured balloons as they registered the arrival of the media. The expressions on their faces shifted from outrage to stunned, horrified silence. Their investors, who had been clustered nearby, began to murmur amongst themselves, their champagne flutes forgotten. Mayor Thompson, a portly man with a politician's practiced smile, emerged from his car and strode towards a discreetly placed podium that our team had set up earlier near the edge of the woodland. He tapped the microphone. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice booming. "We are gathered here today for a truly wonderful announcement, a testament to the spirit of community and generosity that makes our city great." He beamed at the news cameras. "It is my distinct honour to welcome the Haven for Hope Foundation to Blackwood Creek, the future site of a much-needed sanctuary and resource centre for women and children in crisis." He spoke for a few minutes, praising the initiative, then turned the podium over to Zuriel. She stepped up, poised and eloquent, her voice filled with genuine passion. She thanked the mayor, the city officials, and the community for their support. "This incredible opportunity," Zuriel said, her eyes shining, "was made possible by the vision and extraordinary generosity of one remarkable individual. Someone who saw the potential for this beautiful piece of land not as a source of profit, but as a source of healing and hope." She smiled, her gaze sweeping over the stunned crowd until it landed on me, standing quietly at the edge of the group. "It gives me immense pleasure to introduce the visionary donor, Ms. Nicole Cox." A smattering of applause, mostly from the Haven for Hope supporters and a few enlightened city officials, broke the stunned silence. Dad and Caden stared at me, their faces utterly drained of colour. Dad looked like he'd seen a ghost. Caden's mouth hung open, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning, venomous fury. Their humiliation, their utter public downfall was being broadcast live. I walked forward, my steps steady, my expression calm. I took my place at the podium, the cameras flashing. "Thank you, Zuriel," I began, my voice clear and strong. "And thank you, Mayor Thompson, and everyone who has gathered here today to celebrate a new beginning for Blackwood Creek." I looked directly at Dad and Caden. "For years, this land, precious to my late mother, sat waiting for a purpose that honoured its spirit." I paused, letting my words sink in. Some saw it merely as an opportunity for quick development, for luxury condos that would serve the few. But I, through my little charity work, saw a different potential. The faintest emphasis on little charity work was, I hoped, not lost on them. I saw a place of refuge, a place of strength, a place where lives could be rebuilt. And so I made a choice to ensure that Blackwood Creek would serve not short-sighted greed, but long-term community good. Then, the twist I'd saved. My due diligence, something often overlooked in rushed ventures, I continued, my gaze sweeping over the bewildered faces of their investors, revealed that Blackwood Creek's unique, fragile ecosystem, an ecosystem I quietly worked to have recognised by a local conservation trust several years ago, made it wholly unsuitable for the kind of intensive, high-impact development that was, until recently, planned for this site. A murmur went through the crowd. Luckily, I added, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. It's perfectly suited for a low-impact, community-focused sanctuary like Haven for Hope. The implication was clear. Their own supposed business acumen, their vaunted expertise, had failed them spectacularly. They hadn't even known the true nature of the land they were so eager to exploit. As applause for the shelter announcement began to swell, a gasp rippled through the onlookers. Dad swayed, clutching his chest, his face a ghastly, chalky white. Caden rushed to his side, but his eyes, burning with a mixture of disbelief and pure, venomous hatred, were fixed on me. The camera zoomed in on my composed face. I held my ground, a silent victor, as the new narrative of Blackwood Creek, my narrative, began. The fallout from that morning at Blackwood Creek was immediate and catastrophic for Cox & Son development. Juliet Marshall's televised report, featuring Dad's ashen face and Caden's impotent rage juxtaposed with my calm, triumphant announcement went viral locally. Cox and Sons condo calamity, how a daughter's charity trumped a developer's dream was one headline. Another, more pointedly, read, Due diligence debacle, Cox empire crumbles over worthless land. Investors, spooked by the public humiliation and the clear demonstration of shoddy groundwork, began to pull out of other Cox and Son projects. Contracts were suddenly under scrutiny. Banks got nervous. Their carefully constructed reputation, built on an image of ruthless efficiency, shattered like cheap glass. I heard whispers that Desmond Murray, Dad's old rival, was already circling, sniffing out their most vulnerable assets like a vulture sensing a kill. Dad, as it turned out, hadn't had a heart attack, but the stress of it all landed him in the hospital for a week with a serious blood pressure crisis. He emerged a diminished man, the arrogant bluster gone, replaced by a bitter, resentful silence. He refused to see me, refused to even speak my name. Caden, on the other hand, was incandescent with rage. He tried everything. First, a messy, ill-conceived legal challenge to the land donation. Matthew, armed with impeccable documentation and the full backing of the city, shut that down so fast Caden probably got whiplash. Your brother seems to believe shouting louder makes his case stronger, Matthew had remarked dryly after one particularly fraught preliminary hearing. It does not. Then came the online smear campaign. Anonymous posts appeared on local forums, accusing me of manipulating an elderly woman, Zuriel, presumably, of defrauding my own family, of being mentally unstable. It was vicious, ugly, and utterly predictable. But Sarah, our PR consultant, working with Matthew, was ready. They countered with facts, with testimonials from respected community leaders supporting Haven for Hope, and perhaps, just perhaps, with a few strategically leaked details about some of Cox and Sons' less savoury past business dealings that my own charity work research had conveniently uncovered. Caden's digital tantrum fizzled out, achieving nothing but making him look even more desperate and unhinged. A few days after the Blackwood Creek unveiling, Aunt Vivian called. Her voice was a strange mix of awe and quiet sympathy. "Nicole," she said, I saw the news. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Aunt Vivian," I said, and surprisingly, I was. "Your father, he's taking it very hard." "I imagine he is," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. There was a pause. "What you did, it was remarkable." Another pause. "Perhaps, when things settle down, we could have lunch again?" A tentative olive branch. "I'd like that, Aunt Vivian," I said, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of genuine family connection, albeit from an unexpected quarter. My relationship with Dad and Caden was, of course, irrevocably severed. The silence from their end was absolute. There were no angry phone calls, no confrontations, just a vast, empty space where a family used to be. It was a heavy price, I couldn't deny that. But with it came a profound sense of liberation, of lightness. I was no longer Nicole, the underestimated daughter, the charity case. I was Nicole, the woman who had taken on an empire and won. The true victory, though, wasn't in their downfall, as satisfying as that had been to witness. It was in what rose from the ashes of their greed. The groundbreaking for Haven for Hope, the real one, took place a short while later, on a crisp autumn day. Mayor Thompson was there, beaming. Zuriel gave a heartfelt speech, and this time, the news crews were there to celebrate a genuine community triumph. I stood to one side, watching as the first ceremonial shovels broke ground, not for luxury condos, but for a place of safety and healing. A group of women, future residents and beneficiaries of the shelter, stood nearby, their faces filled with a hope that was almost tangible. One of them, a young mother clutching a toddler's hand, caught my eye and gave me a small, grateful smile. That smile, that single, heartfelt acknowledgement, was worth more than all the revenge in the world. The sweetness of their public humiliation had been potent. I won't lie. It had been a necessary rebalancing of the scales after years of their arrogance. But this was different. This was creation, not destruction. My little charity work, the thing they'd mocked and belittled for so long, hadn't just stopped them, it had built something vital, something life-affirming, a legacy far more meaningful than any glass tower they could have ever conceived. Their empire of arrogance had met its match in a daughter they never truly saw. The cost was my old family, the one built on condescension and deceit. But the reward was this new, authentic life, and the countless lives Haven for Hope would touch. And that, I realized, watching the sunlight filter through the trees of Blackwood Creek, was the most powerful karma of all.